We're starting.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to do a quick sound check right before we get started. Can everyone use the raise hand function if you can hear me? And if you are on the phone, I think you can press *9. Oh, I'm seeing so many raised hands. Excellent. All right, so this sounds good. I think we're so far so good with the sound check. Awesome. Welcome. So I'd first like to introduce, with a few opening remarks, our Deputy Commissioner, Sheila Feinberg.
Thank you, LaDan, and welcome everybody. It's great to have so many of you joining us this afternoon. Just so you folks, I'm Sheila Feinberg, as LaDan mentioned. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for DCLA, and I want to do a personal thank you to all of you, not only for joining us for this webinar, but for everything that you have contributed to New York City this past year, for helping the city weather this unprecedented storm, helping to document it, and helping us to process and recover from it. I think we can see that slowly the city is reopening. We can see that the city is starting to come back to the city that we know and love. We are proud, DCLA is proud to be one of the nation's largest public funders of arts and culture. And we are excited to see many organizations receiving renewed DCLA support for the first time. And for those of you who have applied to DCLA before, you will see some changes in response to COVID-19 that we hope to carry into future years. We will be rolling out a responsive, streamlined, and more equitable competitive panel process for the Cultural Development Fund next year. And we wanted to make sure to remind you to register your email to keep in touch with us. We'll be sharing details about the fiscal year 23 cycle throughout the coming year. And again, just thank you for joining us. I want to also just give a special thank you to some of the DCLA staff that are helping to make this webinar happen and having it be seamless. Of course, you heard from LaDan, who already said hello, but then also some other staff, including Ashley, Alana, Anthony, and Claudia. I just want to say thank you to all of them as well. So I'm going to now hand it back over to our program officer, LaDan Hamidi Tusi. LaDan, take it away.
Thank you, Sheila. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Fiscal 2022 Cultural Development Fund Renewal Application Seminar. As Sheila mentioned, my name is LaDan Hamidi Tusi. I use she, her pronouns. And again, joining me behind the scenes today from the DCLA program staff are Ashley Firestone, Anthony Myers, Kate Fox, Claudia Arzeno, and Alana DePenafrez. We'll be working together to present this webinar and answer your questions. This webinar will be recorded, and a version with closed captioning will be made available on our website shortly after the conclusion of the webinar. However, if you have specific questions that are unique to your organization, please do email your program officer separately. There is a large audience on the webinar today. We may or may not be able to get to answer all your questions, but you can always email your program officer directly. Also want to give a special thank you to the Harlem Chamber Players for allowing us to showcase their Black History Month live stream performance from this past February. That was playing as you all joined the webinar, so a huge thanks to them. Really grateful for them giving us the permission to show that. So this seminar will review the steps required to complete an eligible renewal application to the Department of Cultural Affairs for fiscal year 2022. We are thrilled that more than 400 organizations are receiving their first ever multi-year award from the Department of Cultural Affairs. If you have not done so already, we suggest you download both the renewal application instructions and the CDF guidelines documents. We've included those links in the chat box for this webinar. And DCLA would like to take a moment to let, again, all attendees know that this event will be recorded. We intend to post this recording on our website at a later date and may use all or part of the recording in the future or authorize others to use it for non-commercial purposes consistent with our mission. If you do not wish your name to be included in this recording, please direct all communications to your program officer or CDF help desk at culture.nyc.gov rather than using the Q&A feature of the presentation. If you do not wish to have your name visible to other participants or potential future viewers, you may exit this virtual event and watch the recording on our website when it's posted, or you may also elect to register and attend the next seminar, which will not be recorded. A note on accessibility, we have created this presentation with accessibility in mind. In addition to this live presentation, the recorded version will be posted on our YouTube page with closed captions in the coming days. A copy of this webinar may be requested via email to CDF helpdesk at culture.nyc.gov. That is accessible by screen readers. A blank PDF copy of the application form can also be downloaded from our website to assist you as you complete the online submission. And in the next slide, my fantastic colleague Alana will provide guidance for any guests whose primary language is Spanish. Next slide, please.
¿Tiene alguna pregunta en español? Puede pedir asistencia en español enviando un email al helpdesk al cdfhelpdesk@culture.nyc.gov. Mi colega o yo le contestaremos su pregunta lo más rápido posible.
Next slide. Thank you so much, Alana. So we've divided this presentation into several sections and we'll take questions throughout the webinar. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask a question at any time. Behind the scenes, we'll be monitoring your questions and throughout the webinar, answering them and reserving time to answer them live in batches. To streamline our time together, we have disabled the chat function. I will not be able to see your questions unless you submit them by clicking the Q&A button in your Zoom screen. First, I'll give you a brief overview of CDF program funding in FY22 and how this process has been revised in response to the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. I will then give an overview of City Council funding, followed by a review of the fiscal 2022 eligibility requirements. We'll share some tips and reminders for various parts of the renewal application and the procedural requirements to submit a complete application. And we'll end with time for questions. Please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A function throughout the webinar. If you have a question that is specific to your organization, our behind the scenes team will answer you directly. And if your question is more broadly applicable and has not otherwise been answered in the presentation, we'll respond to it at the end of this webinar. And that way all can benefit from your question. Please don't be shy, ask those questions. And for that reason, we do strongly suggest that you stay for this presentation in full. Next slide, please. DCLA will accept proposals in every cultural discipline and from all areas within New York City for services that take place within the 5 boroughs and within the city's FY22. That's July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. The fundamental requirement for all proposals is that they represent a valuable cultural activity that is accessible to the New York City public. Funded services can be as different as the organizations providing them, but they will all have a common commitment to public service and public participation. Next slide, please. The following changes have been made to this FY22 CDF cycle in order to streamline the process and will be particularly noteworthy for organizations who have filled out an application in previous years. There will be no competitive panel review for baseline CDF funding. FY22 applicants are not subject to the competitive panel review that usually is part of the process. This is why many of you are receiving renewed funding. DCLA aims to return to this assessment for FY23. And importantly, this means that no new CDF panel review grants will be administered for FY22. You can refer to the total final award amount in your FY21 notification letter to inform your renewal proposal's request amount. And if you're unsure whether your organization is receiving an FY22 renewal and should be applying as part of this June deadline, please do contact your program officer immediately. All renewing grantees are eligible for other FY22 funding streams administered by this agency. That includes the City Council discretionary funds that we administer, that, such as Cultural After School Adventures Program, known as CASA, and the Cultural Immigrant Initiative. As in years past, these applicants may be considered for potential additional one-time funds as available if they meet criteria for service to target communities. Next slide, please. These revisions have also been applied in order to submit a complete CDF renewal application for FY22. No need to submit an SMU Data Arts report. Starting in FY22, applicants are no longer required to complete and submit a data profile and report via SMU Data Arts as you would have in previous years. However, DCLA continues to recommend that arts and cultural organizations participate in the data collection and engage with the platform to have access to the many different reports and services offered by SMU Data Arts. And organizations with budgets under $250,000 are actually eligible for the first round of the data entry pilot, wherein Data Arts will complete the data entry for your organization. There's also no need to submit supplemental board lists or funding plans as part of the supplemental materials for this renewal. However, keep in mind that this information may still be required elsewhere, for example, a tax form or other applications, and should be submitted as necessary. You will be required to list income sources and the names and email addresses of 3 board members that hold an officer title within the application itself. Changes to the project description section. So instead of prior years where applicants were able to submit up to 5 unique project narratives, organizations will consolidate all FY22 CDF requests into 1 project field. And we will go into much further detail about this later in the presentation. No more pre-populated fields. Organizations must review and ensure all entered information is accurate. There are optional fields. However, 13 previously required sections of the online application form are now optional. All of the fields where responses are now optional are labeled as such in the application form. Previously, the deadline for submission was at midnight. This year, the deadline for your submission of both the online form and your digital supplemental materials is 5 p.m. Eastern time. All right, so let's look and see if we have a few questions. We'll pause for a moment. So let's see, first question, for the City Council funds administered through DCLA, do organizations have to be registered and pre-qualified through the HHS Accelerator? Thank you for that question. No, we administer grants and not contracts. We do not participate in the HHS Accelerator. If you do get running through other agencies, you may need to do it, but not for DCLA. Next question. For the project description, is the character count 3,500 or 5,000? It says different counts and different instructions guidelines. Oh, thank you for bringing that to attention. It should not be different in different sections of the resource documents. And we will get to this a little bit later. The character limit for the project description is 3,500 characters. And maybe Ashley or one of my colleagues can make a note that we'll check on those documents to make sure that they are consistent. Next question we'll answer live. When you say renewal application, is it in reference to the organization receiving the same amount that was received in 21, or is it in reference to renewal in general? When we say renewal application, it is in reference to the fact that funding has been committed to your organization for this coming year. And it is based on the baseline amount, and you can find that in your award letter as well. Renewal in general, yes, but it's not that you have to renew the same projects you've been doing before, but it's about the fact that your award amount is committed to renew for 22 and based on the baseline amount. So I'll take one more question and then we'll move on. For the sections that are optional, what are the advantages, disadvantages here? Will it count against us in any way if we opt out of these things? No, as we mentioned, there is no panel review. The staff will review your renewal application for clarity, completeness, and eligibility. There are no disadvantages to choosing not to fill out any of the optional fields. Okay, so let's keep going for the seminar. Keep those questions coming. So a quick reminder about the City Council and how its funding relates to ours. The Department of Cultural Affairs is overseen by the mayor and works closely with our partners in the City Council to ensure compliance, inform policy, and administer funds, among other work. The support and partnership of the City Council, its speaker, and its Cultural Affairs Committee is critical to our funding process. Not only that, but they devote considerable funding to culture in all 51 council districts of New York City. Keep your elected officials informed of what you are doing by sending them a copy of this application and inviting them to events and programs. They have a process separate from the agencies for making funding decisions, and we want you to know and understand how both processes relate and what is required of each. Next slide, please. DCLA administers several different and distinct funds for cultural activities, and in order to be eligible for any initiative or other council support that is administered by DCLA, organizations are required to be eligible for and complete an FY22 CDF annual or renewal application. The CDF application is the key to eligibility for any grants our agency administers. It's our core program. And if you don't submit this application, your organization will not be able to receive funds through DCLA in this fiscal year, though it still may be possible to receive funds through other city agencies. City council support takes two different forms. We have discretionary or member item support and through several specific initiatives. In this slide, we'll explain the discretionary awards, those member items, and in the following slide, we'll discuss council initiatives. Each individual member of the City Council may designate cultural organizations for support in their council district. Such support, known as discretionary or member item support, is usually allocated through DCLA's budget when it is for cultural activities. Discretionary awards are for 1 year only, and in addition, organizations must have submitted the council's own discretionary funding application on their website, and that was due February 16th, 2021. The projects for which such discretionary support is sought must be the same as those in the CDF application. Contact the council member in the district where you are providing services to learn about the additional requirements that may apply to this funding, or if you missed the fiscal year 22 discretionary funding application deadline. Next slide, please. In addition to discretionary support for CDF activities, the council has created a number of initiatives which provide single-year support for specific purposes. For fiscal 2021, these included CASA, the Coalition of Theaters of Color, the Cultural Immigrant Initiative, SUCASA, and the Anti-Gun Violence Initiative, Art, a Catalyst for Change. While the council designs these initiatives and designates who will receive funds under them, our agency administers them. And unlike regular discretionary items, these initiative-funded projects cannot overlap with any CDF-funded activities. So do not include them in your CDF application. Again, in order to be eligible for any council support that's designated through DCLA, whether for CDF activities or for one or more of the council initiatives, you are required to complete both the FY22 CDF application and the council's discretionary application found on the City Council's website. Next slide, please. So this table on the slide right now is an overview of what we've just discussed. You'll note that how the discretionary or member item award funds may only be used toward the project you include in the FY22 CDF application, and the initiative award funds may explicitly not be used toward that project. The member item awards are also added to the CDF grant agreement because the funds will be used towards the same project. Any initiative award that is designated by the council will have its own independent grant agreement and a separately submitted project synopsis. Information about that process will be shared after the designations have been made and following the adoption of the city's fiscal 22 budget on or around July 1st. All right, we'll pause for more questions. Let's see. So is there a total org budget requirement in order to qualify for the total amount threshold for which you are applying? Not a total organizational budget, but we will get into this where there's a threshold amount for the project costs. So we'll get to that when we get a little bit closer to the section about projects. Next question was, sorry to repeat a question, for FY22, should we include the funds added at adoption and location-based funding received in FY21? Overall, we would probably advise that you base your request for 22 on the award total that you received for 21. It is hard to determine yet what additional funds will be available for 22. That budget is being negotiated right now. and we won't have the exact amounts until the budget is adopted and the fiscal year begins in July. But we are recommending that you base your request amount on the total FY21 award that you received. Let's see. Oh, I'm so sorry. I will speak slower. Thank you for that feedback. So the next question I'll answer, what is the renewal certification referring to in terms of change? Under what conditions would an organization choose yes? Is DCLA asking about COVID related or other related changes, virtual versus in person? So this section of the application is essentially just asking if what you're proposing this year is in any way different from what you proposed last year. And it really doesn't have to be different, or it doesn't have to be the same. It's just information. It can be related to COVID. It can be related to some other reason. Like, oh, well, last year was a 20th anniversary. We did a big concert. We're not doing that again because this year isn't our 20th anniversary anymore. So it's just about asking in what way your proposed services for 22 are altered or different or somehow changed from what you may have proposed in FY21. And it is, again, not that you can't apply for different things. It's just asking for that question. The next question I'll answer live. Is LAF, that stands for Language Access Fund, a council initiative funding? No, Language Access Fund is not a council initiative fund. Question, we've already submitted to City Council for discretionary funding for this period. Must this project match that one? So if that application was for that regular discretionary or member item funds that would get totaled with your CDF award, then yes, the project must be the same because those come and form one grant agreement and one scope. If your application to the City Council was for an initiative like CASA or CTC, then it should not be for the same project because those need to be separate and they can't overlap. All right. Let's take a couple more questions and then we'll move on. Answered that one. So this question is, since we apply for council discretionary funds and council initiative support in the same application in February, how do we distinguish this in our CDF application? Should we apply for CDF funds for the same projects we submitted for discretionary member item funding, then submit a different project for council initiative funding if we are awarded that? Yes, exactly. The CDF application will be specifically for what you intend to use your CDF funds for in that member item or just regular discretionary award that you requested. And you would indicate that in the budget as part of your request that includes X number of dollars that you're projecting from City Council. And then if you are also separately awarded council initiative funds, that will be for some other project that is not part of your CDF. So yes. Let's see. I'll take one more question and then we'll move forward. So does our CDF project have to be exactly the same as the request to council members, or could we create a broader project, something like public programs, to help us cover some of the other projects that we would include if we were able to apply to CDF as we did last year? It doesn't have to be just that project. If you do more things, it can be a broader project, yes. And it just needs to include, at the very least, what the council members what you requested from the City Council, so that when you get the grant agreement and it says all of this money is for this project, those things are consistent. Okay, so I'm gonna keep moving on. We'll go to the next section. So these are the basic requirements for eligibility for CDF funding. For renewing applicants, we confirm these requirements each year. Applicants must be a cultural organization, administratively based in one of the 5 boroughs of New York City as demonstrated by the organization's address on its fiscal year 2019 IRS 990. Incorporated as a nonprofit in New York State as of the organization's fiscal year ending in 2019. Current with the New York State Charities Bureau filings, in possession of a unique federal employee identification number, or EIN, certified tax exempt under IRS Code Section 501c3, and able to demonstrate at least 2 years of cultural public service in New York City. If your organization is incorporated as a nonprofit, but does not have its own 501c3, you may be eligible to apply, but you must use an approved fiscal sponsor or conduit. Your organization will be required to provide evidence that your agreement with the conduit is current. If you are not sure whether your conduit is eligible, please email your program officer or the help desk. Organizations whose original incorporation filings were outside of New York State will be required to submit a certificate of foreign authority from the New York State Department of State. Next slide, please. If your organization's primary mission is other than arts and culture, your renewal application will be expected to confirm the following criteria: have a long-standing record of cultural programming, demonstrate programs of in-depth artistic quality that are accessible to the public, provide written documentation regarding any annual filing exemptions, and submit cultural and overall organizational budgets. This applies to social and/or multi-service organizations, religious institutions, or organizations providing general non-arts education. As in the past, your application will be reviewed based on the portion of your FY19 operating income that relates to your cultural activities. As one of these institutions, it is imperative that you have separate financial and programmatic information available for the cultural component of your organization's for all fiscal years since 2019. And there is more information in the guidelines for these organizations. If you are an organization whose mission is to provide arts education, this does not apply to you. Next slide, please. We expect applicants to be fiscally responsible and administratively competent, demonstrated by submission of appropriate financial statements, a realistic proposed budget, and satisfactory reporting, among other things. Programs should be of recognized quality, exemplified by the submitted materials. Organizations are required to have a 2-year track record of service in New York City, and this will be established with your fiscal 2019 and 2020 activities and financial documents. If your organization paused operations due to the COVID-19 pandemic, please email your program officer so we may better understand your specific situation. Note that organizations receiving CDF funds in FY22 are not eligible for a DCLA regrant from your local arts council in the same fiscal year, though you may be eligible for other grants that they administer. Next slide, please. Public access during fiscal 2022 is the key component of activities funded by CDF. The guidelines contain a longer list of examples, but here are a few. We have creation of new work and or restoration of existing work for public presentation. Also, arts education programs, community-based arts activities, services that assist New York City's artists and arts organizations, training programs, presentation of works in progress, virtual programs with a clear artistic service provided to New York City audiences. DCLA can fund any of these activities, but only if the public access falls between July 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 2022, and within the 5 boroughs of New York City. Note that while your FY21 funding is expected to renew in FY22, you must still propose specific cultural services that align with our guidelines for your renewal to be approved. Remember that funding received via the Department of Cultural Affairs must be for publicly accessible activities that are cultural in nature. We include the humanities and sciences in our definition of culture, but not physical fitness, social services, or general education like homework help. Please email your program officer if you have any questions about your project's eligibility. And remember that these funds may not be used for equipment purchases or capacity building. Next slide, please. So keep in mind, again, what we do not fund. Please do not ask DCLA to support activities outside of the city's fiscal year or outside of the 5 boroughs. We expect you to fundraise, but we cannot fund you to do so. Capital projects, as I mentioned, including equipment purchases. This also includes construction. These fall under a different unit at DCLA and don't request those projects here. Lobbying or other governmental advocacy can be helpful for organizations to receive funding from elected officials, but these funds may not be used towards those efforts. Libraries and degree granting institutions receive funding through other city agencies. So for the most part, we do not fund those organizations. And DCLA also cannot fund proposals for general operating support or internal capacity building. So don't give your project the title General Operating Support and ask for that. You still must propose projects that provide services to the public. Note, however, that if you are awarded funding, as long as those services are delivered as described, you may use CDF funding to cover any operational costs that are not capital expenditures, fundraising, or government advocacy efforts in service of executing those projects. Your CDF proposed projects cannot include activities funded by any other initiatives administered through this agency, including initiatives designated by the City Council, such as CASA and the Cultural Immigrant Initiative. Next slide, please. Note these specific policies regarding CDF funding. Organizations may request support for a maximum of 1 project describing the programs they do within New York City. No more than 75% of the total project costs may come from DCLA. And if funded, organizations are expected to complete all programming as proposed, regardless of the amount awarded. If your previously funded application included more than 1 project, you'll, as we said, consolidate or condense your proposed services into 1 overall project narrative and project budget in this renewal. We encourage you to review the guidelines carefully before completing the proposed services portion of the application, including the section on our priorities and criteria. Remember, while applicants request funds for unique programs and are evaluated on their public services, funds received from the CDF can be used to cover any operating costs except capital expenditures, government advocacy efforts, or fundraising. While in-kind support can often be critical to an organization, please do not include it in any of the budget figures you provide in this application. There is a specific section in the application budget notes where we ask for details regarding in-kind support. Note that we expect all FY22 grantees may return to a competitive process in FY23, and all registered applicants will receive detailed information about that process when it is available. Next slide, please. When an organization is funded, notification will take place after the grant period has begun. You may not know the exact award amount until the fall, even for programs that take place in the summer. So please plan accordingly. Our agency's budget is finalized with the city's budget on or about July 1st. We expect each grantee to move forward with the activities proposed, regardless of the size of the DCLA award or the timing of our payments. Funds may not move as swiftly as you or we would like, and we do appreciate your understanding. Generally, 80% is paid as an advance as early in the fiscal year as possible, and the remaining 20% can be paid out only upon completion of services and approval of final reporting. In some years, there have been budget adjustments mid-year that have increased or decreased awards slightly. Those adjustments are made when we issue final payments for the most part. It has been our good fortune in the past several years to have additional single-year funds added to the CDF, which were apportioned to all funded organizations based on Create NYC priorities. And I think I mentioned earlier, we do not know yet if and how much of these funds will reoccur for FY22. Next slide, please. Funded applicants are expected to have adequate insurance to cover their activities. We expect you to be ADA compliant. Funded organizations must also follow DCLA's policy for acknowledging the receipt of these funds by including the updated DCLA logo and appropriate credit language in digital and printed materials. All of these expectations are more thoroughly described in the guidelines, including specific policy information for our insurance requirements. So let's pause here and take a few questions for the group. So first one, could we group our arts education programs under one umbrella as a project, or should we showcase one specific program that complies with the budget, max 75%? This is up to you. You may do either of those things. Either one would be appropriate. Next question. Given that we've already applied to the City Council for other projects, it sounds like we should include multiple projects into one application description. Potentially, if you are expecting council discretionary funding to be part of your CDF award for 22, then it would make sense to align. You may want to speak more specifically to your program officer about what those projects are and how best to frame them. Next one, our DCLA funded programs in the past have included 4 separate streams, public presentation, etc. For the one project requirement for this renewal, will we need to choose one of these or combine them into one proposal? And I think this is sort of like similar to the first question. It's up to you. You can choose to submit one proposal that is sort of a component, has multiple components and includes all of these things. And, or you may elect to say, one of these is the one I'm going to apply for. It complies with all of the other threshold requirements. And so that's one I'm going to focus on. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the next part of the seminar. Next question, what categories are considered single year awards? Okay, so for the most part, anything that is a council funding is, those are one-year awards. And the letter that you have received for your FY21 grant should break down what amount is your baseline and what amount were distribution of additional funds that were for that year, and we don't have yet the full information about how much or will recur. And if you have specific questions about that amount, those amounts for yourself or your organization, I would email your program officer. If we applied for City Council discretionary funding for FY22, but did not apply in FY21, should we still use our FY21 CDF award amount for the renewal, or should we add the amount of City Council discretionary funding that we applied for this year? That is exactly right. You should take whatever you're projecting for fiscal 22 and add that on. If you didn't do that for 21, but you will be doing that for 22, and you expect that for 22, yes, incorporate that in your request for FY22. And there's part of the budget where you can indicate how much of that is your projection for council funding. I'll take one more question and then we'll keep moving. So this question is, we typically receive discretionary support from City Council, but it is always administered by DYCD, that is the Department of Youth and Community Development, if anybody didn't know. And as such, can't overlap with DCLA funds, CDF funds. In this case, shouldn't we leave the discretionary programs out of our CDF renewal project description? So a couple of things. The fact that your funds are being administered by DYCD doesn't necessarily mean that it can't overlap with CDF. That's a different agency, and so we don't have any stake in that. There's a line in the budget to say other city, and if that's part of what you're going to apply to these projects, you put that in other city and you identify in the notes that it's DYCD. If you have more specific questions about that for yourself, again, I would probably ask your program officer and they can talk them through that. Okay, so let's keep moving. So we're highlighting this information again on this slide to make sure you don't miss it. So the application consists of two parts. There's an online form to be completed and submitted on the DCLA website, and there are required supplemental materials submitted via online form. Links to both are found in the instructions, the guidelines, and on our website. Both must be received no later than Monday, June 14th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Please note that the form will close at 5 p.m., not like midnight in the past. Next slide, please. So we're next going to talk about the online CDF application form itself. After you've logged in, you will be taken to the home page for your organization. This slide includes a screenshot of that page of the form, which shows your organization's name, a button to link to your user-managed account profile, and all current and past applications and final reports, whether they are in draft or final status. A first step for every registered applicant is to review the information on your organization's account profile for accuracy and completeness. You can view the account profile by clicking the yellow button on the right side of the page. Please update your organization's account profile and registration information to ensure that it is current and complete. We understand that many organizations may have changed leadership this past year. The agency will use this profile throughout the year to contact your organization, and this is how you will receive notification of the application outcome, as well as critical information about other funding opportunities and other announcements the commissioner shares with the field. So one thing I'll just note right now is, unlike in the previous seminars, we're not going to walk step by step through the online form today. Each field of the application is described with accompanying screenshots in the instructions, which you can download from our website. So we would refer you to that. Next slide, please. On this slide is a screenshot of what the online renewal application launch page looks like. So I'm going to share some highlights to keep in mind as you complete the online application. Again, all of this information is also included in the instructions and in the form itself. Opening two application windows in your browser is not permitted and will disrupt the data saving process. So please ensure that only one browser window at a time is open with your application. Please turn off your ad blocker and to ensure that all fields are visible. Please don't copy directly from your website into the form. That can sometimes result in embedded special characters that cause technical malfunctions. We would suggest using a text editing application first, like Notepad, and then copying into the application form from there. Remember to save your work often as you go. The system logs you out after 10 minutes if you have not saved a page or navigated to a different section of the form. Do not hit the yellow submit button until you are sure the application is ready for submission. You cannot change your application after hitting the yellow submit button, or submit application button, excuse me. Once you submit this form, the active users listed on your account profile will get an automated email confirmation that you have completed the online portion of the application. Save this email for your records. If you do not receive the confirmation, check your junk mail folder before contacting us. The confirmation email will include your FY22 application number and another copy of the application checklist, even if you've already submitted your supplemental materials. Your application number is assigned automatically when the completed online application is submitted. We cannot provide an application number before the online form is received. Next slide, please. So some more tips as you begin your application. Be sure to include your organization's actual mission statement and ensure that your proposed project clearly fulfills that mission. Include as many details as you can about the audience you intend to serve with your proposed project. Describe how you will reach that audience before, during, and after your program, and how you may engage with historically underrepresented audiences. Describe how you seek and empower diverse decision makers within your organization's leadership. We have posted resources for diversity, equity, and inclusion topics on the Applying tab of our website, and we hope that you will utilize those as part of your ongoing and evolving efforts to contribute to an empowering and just cultural ecosystem in New York City. Include previous year's activities that relate to the projects you're proposing to give a sense of your experience presenting these types of cultural programs. Next slide, please. So this has come up a couple of times, and we noted it at the beginning of the presentation. There's only one project field in this year's application. This is a change from previous years where you could submit up to 5 projects for consideration. And note that the character count of 3,500 in this project narrative is not changed from previous years. This reduction in the number of available spaces to describe a project will not reduce DCLA's funding commitment to your organization for FY22. If your organization previously submitted a proposal for multiple projects, you may consider, again, combining them or narrowing the scope of your request depending upon your organization's unique situation. Again, this has come up a couple of questions before. If you submitted in the past, for example, 3 projects, that was last year's application, you could condense those activities into a single project description, or you may look and choose one of those projects and propose that as your project for this year. Next slide, please. So a couple of factors you may consider in this, sort of like what's your choice and what you want to do, is your request amount and the total project budget size. In FY22, DCLA can fund up to 75% of a total project's cost. In the renewal application, we recommend requesting, again, the same amount as the total award in your FY21 CDF grant agreement, inclusive of any projected member items, and as always, separate from any anticipated City Council initiatives. Fiscal constraints facing the city and state may require changes to FY22 funding that may decrease your total award. The total project budget must itemize income and expenses for all programmatic activities detailed in the single project description. Your request amount to DCLA should relate to how you frame your project description. For example, if your FY22 total final award amount is $7,500 and DCLA can only support 75% of the total project costs, you should request $7,500 from DCLA, and your project budget must reflect expenses of $10,000 or more. So that's how that math works. In your total project expenses, you'll total, if your total project expenses total less than your FY21 total final award, you will need to include additional scope and activity in your project description and budget in order to meet that minimum. Next slide, please. Some more tips as you craft your project proposal. Again, remember the focus of CDF support is artistic services to the public. Be sure that your narrative connects your project to your organization's mission and is clear as possible, answering these journalistic questions such as who will be providing and receiving the service, what will be taking place, when and where it will happen, how many engagements, and how frequently will they occur. We do look to the applicant to define its public and describe the access that it provides. So it's up to you to clearly define the public you're serving. DCLA funds projects of both breadth and depth, those that reach a broad range of people, as well as those that provide a depth of service for a small number of people. Your public could be anything from 5 participants in a series of workshops to 200 people at an outdoor open culture presentation to 1,000 students, DOE students in New York attending a virtual concert. And we understand that some specifics might not be confirmed when the application is submitted, especially nowadays when things are changing and there's a lot of uncertainty. But when this is the case, be sure to include as much detail as you can about how you will go about making the decisions that will make the project a reality, including when key decisions will be made and who the key decision makers are. Next slide, please. So a few tips as you enter your budget figures and notes. The application requires budgets for your overall organization and for the specific project you're proposing. The organizational budget should reflect your fiscal year. The project budget should reflect the city's fiscal year. That's again, July 1st through June 30th. We suggest working on your budget offline first. You may use an Excel document if that's easier, because the application form times out after 10 minutes of not saving your work. We just don't want you to get like kicked out in the middle of figuring out or filling out your budget. The CDF request amount will be drawn from the figure you enter in your project budget under DCLA project request. So be sure to request at least as much as you anticipate receiving and refer to your FY21 total award to inform your request amount. As noted earlier, DCLA's award may cover up to 75% of your project costs in FY22, but the form will not allow a request amount that exceeds that percentage. Your City Council initiative expected income should not be listed in your project budget. As we discussed earlier, those awards must not overlap with your CDF programs. However, you should include the expectation for those awards in your organizational budget in the DCLA Other field. And you can click on the yellow budget overview button to review those budgets next to each other. That's a function of the application form. Next slide, please. So on this slide is a screenshot of what the online supplemental materials submission form looks like. We're also going to share some highlights about the supplemental materials here that are included in the instructions and the guidelines. Remember, a complete application that is eligible for funding must include the submission of digital supplemental materials. There will be no exceptions to the June 14th deadline, and organizations that fail to submit both the online application and supplemental materials by the deadline will be ineligible for funding from this agency in FY22. Consult the application checklist to determine your required supplemental materials, although note that you do not need to submit the application checklist back to us. Ensure your IRS 990 is for the fiscal year that ended in 2019. If you are a social, multi-service, religious, or educational institution, complete the organizational budget template. And if your organizational budget is less than $50,000, you'll also complete the signed treasurer's statement template. DCLA will not accept hard copy supplemental materials or those submitted via email. The FY22 CDF application supplemental submission form should only be submitted once per organization. So please be sure that all of the correct documents have been saved and uploaded as PDF files before pressing the submit button. Detailed instructions are found on the form itself, and once submitted, you will be provided with a confirmation number and a copy of your completed submission via email. Next slide, please. So a little sidetrack from the renewal is a reminder about the fact that you will need to submit a final report for FY21, the current year. That's going to be due in August of 2021. We will send an email when the final reporting form is open, but for now, just make sure that you are tracking and collecting appropriate information about your DCLA funded FY21 projects. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the end of the official slideshow. So we'll take some time to answer some questions that came in the Q&A during the presentation. And if you have outstanding general questions at this time, go for it, put them in there, submit them in the Q&A. And then if questions arise as you're completing your application, you can always email your program officer or CDF helpdesk@culture.nyc.gov. Please do allow at least 24 hours for a response. So let's take a gander at these questions. First question, is there an operating budget template available for cultural organizations somewhere? It'd be great to have in Excel format. Thanks. You know, I would probably say you could repurpose the organizational budget template that multi-service or social service organizations are required to fill out. It's a form that's just available on the website. So if you'd like to use that as a worksheet, it's essentially the exact same budget and categories listed as they're in the application form. And, you know, if you're not a social service or multi-service organization, you don't submit it, but you could use it for your work. Let's see, next question. Will you be sharing PowerPoint slides with attendees? Thanks, well, you're welcome. I don't believe we have any intention to distribute the PowerPoint, but this is being recorded, so you can always go back and look at the video, and there'll be, you know, you can skip ahead to any section that you want to review. And all of the material we covered is in the instructions and in the guidelines in some form. All right, I'm going to answer this question. Is the treasurer's signature needed if the project budget or the org budget is under $50,000? So that is an additional requirement for organizations with operating budgets of less than $50,000. It's not if your project is less than $50,000. And the reason that's an additional requirement is because if your organization's budget is less than $50,000, the type of 990 that you're required to submit is the 990N or postcard. And if you're familiar with that, you know it doesn't really have a lot of excuse me, specific budget information, but we'd like to have some additional breakdown of your budget to verify the information that you submit in the application. So that's an additional piece for those organizations, and that's based on your operating budget. Let's see. I'll answer this live. Perhaps I've looked at the wrong questions. This is, can be a blank final report for a prior year. Not sure what the question is there. Sorry, if you wouldn't mind, the person who asked that question, if you wouldn't just like typing it back in, because I don't think I got all of the question. Any other questions? All right, I'll answer this one. Just to confirm, if we previously submitted multiple smaller projects, those can be combined into one project for FY22. Yes, so in the form you'll see you have the ability, you have basically one section for one project description. And you can combine previously submitted projects and say, okay, my one program is public programs and it's got all these components. And maybe on a previous year, those would have been separate projects. But that's what you can do for this year. If you have multiple projects and you were like, you know what, this one main stage project, that was, we used to apply for 3 or 4 projects, but that's the one I really want to focus on this year. And that's going to be the one project I apply for. You could also do it that way. Let's see. In the education program section, the header indicates FY19 educational programs, but then asks for the breakdown of participants for FY20 programs. Are we submitting FY2019 or FY20? Thank you for bringing this to our attention. That is supposed to say FY20. So it should be for the most recently completed year, which is FY20. I'll ask if one of my colleagues can make a note of that, and we'll go back and check to make sure that the information is correct in the online. Can we get a blank final report for a prior year? We do not have any. I believe that there is on our website currently old information from last year. Obviously, the report for 21 isn't live yet, but I believe if you go to the website, there is potentially a link to a blank application or blank final report, which you can use to see the sections. It's very closely tied to the application form. What is the limit of size for our supplemental materials? I believe that it is 10 files. Not sure exactly what the size is, but these are, for the most part, if you're saving it as a PDF, the 1 or 2 documents, there shouldn't be any issue with the submission of any file size. Again, it's just, you know, the items listed on the application checklist. And I believe it's just if you can't submit more than 10 separate files for any one individual section. Okay, let's see. Can you review how to define direct versus indirect recipients? We serve artists and audiences, and it's always hard to decide which are direct. Okay, great. Yes, so for our purposes, the way that we would identify direct versus indirect recipients are who is the focus of the service. Those would be your direct recipients, and those people who are potentially benefiting from it but are not the focus of the service are indirect recipients. And depending on the type of project it is, the direct recipients can be artists or audiences, and the indirect recipients could be artists or audiences. Very common example that we often give is, you know, for a lot of organizations that are doing educational programming in schools or for any other type of arts education. And, you know, the focus of the program is you're going to go into PSX and serve 6 classes of 4th graders, and they're going to meet once a week, and there's 20 kids in each class, and at the end of the sessions, like 26 weeks or whatever the semester is, I'm making these numbers up, but there's going to be like a culminating show where they, you know, the rest of the school and all of the parents and family and everyone comes and sees their performance. So in that example, the students are the focus of your service. So they are the direct recipients of the service. The individuals who attend the culminating show are not the focus of the service, but they are recipients of a service, and so they would be the indirect service recipients in that example. Any other questions? Well, I hope that this has been very helpful for you all. Thank you all again for coming. Please don't hesitate to email your program officer if you continue to have questions, and we will be letting you all know when we post this recording on our website. And thank you again to all my colleagues. Thank you again to the Harlem Chamber Players. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.